Dismantling Global Hindutva, screams the homepage of a website by the same name. This is the portal set up for a 3-day online global conference, which the organizers claim is aimed at exploring the consolidation of Hindu supremacist ideology in India and elsewhere. The organizers claim that this event, that is going to feature Indian academics, journalists and activists, is being supported by a host of North American universities. The seminar has evoked widespread condemnation, with critics alleging that the label of Hindutva is being used as a smokescreen for overt Hinduphobia. The question is this an initiative against bigotry or just blatant propaganda against Hindutva ideology?
You're watching the News Hour at 10, debate number 1 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
So given the backdrop of this dismantling Hindutva conference, there are a lot of voices that are now rising from across the world, particularly from the students community, from the academic community in the United States as well. People who are studying there and are seeing the fallout, or rather this discussion firsthand and in their neighborhood. 5 such people are actually joining us now. We have Arnav Kejriwal, he's the president of the Hindu Students' Council; Rashmi Samant, graduate and former president, University of Oxford, London; Parth Parihar, postdoctoral fellow at the Wallace Institute of Political Economy at the University of Rochester; Naisargi Jaiswal, graduate student at the Texas State University; and Prasiddha Sudhakar, senior at Rutgers University. I want to start by asking you first, Arnav, what do you make of this conference itself, and how does it impact you? Because I saw a few statements where people in the United States, students in the United States, Hindu students in the United States said, we are going to be victims of hate thanks to this conference. How's that?
So first of all, thank you for having me. Just to give a little bit of background, I'm the president of Hindu Students' Council, which is the largest Hindu organization for students and youth across North America. And we've existed since 1990 to provide a safe space to Hindu students that want to organize activities on campus and have a community for celebrations like Diwali, for Holi, for Garba, for discussions about being Hindu, etc. So over the past 15, 20 years, Hindu students have seen a tremendous rise in Hindu phobia on campus in terms of misunderstandings of what it means to be a Hindu student or misunderstandings of what our traditions represent. So naturally, a lot of times, for instance, we've had chapters that run into situations where their local brewery might put Ganesh on a beer bottle, right? So they'll bring that up with the brewery, or they'll notice that there's some kind of issue in a textbook and they'll bring that up with the teacher out of concern. Now, the problem is that this, a lot of times by scholars in the South Asian fields, has been brought into this quote-unquote Hindutva narrative. And so this Global Hindutva Conference is an attempt to kind of paint students in America and in any kind of Western country as Hindutva simply for speaking up for the Hindu community and issues that affect them. So this is naturally a big concern to students and the whole community in the US because, and as my friend Parth is going to say in a few minutes, I'm sure, this is kind of an issue where as soon as you say something about being a Hindu American or being a Hindu Canadian or a Hindu in the UK, you get painted as right-wing, as fascist, as Hindutva, as BJP, which ends up silencing a lot of students. So the reaction is quite visceral in the US because a lot of students and community members feel like they're being silenced. They're not going to be able to speak, and a lot of their, peers that are well-intentioned are starting to question their motives if this Hindutva conference actually has kind of any fold, right? So that's kind of a quick answer to that, Padmaji.
Parth, again, I want to repeat that question. How is people holding a conference about Hindutva affecting you as a Hindu student? Because the distinction being made is that Hinduism is the religion, Hindutva is the political assertion by using the Hindu identity. And that is also, anti-Muslim, it is fascist, etc.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Padmaja, so thanks for that. So I guess what I would say is that they make this claim that they're making a distinction between Hindutva and Hinduism. So it's really important to look at the claims that the conference is making. And so there are many, many things that the conference says that are objectionable, but I'll just focus on three main things. So the first thing that they say is that Hindu phobia doesn't exist. So what this means practically for a student is that if they face any type of bias at the university or even in their daily lives, it makes them very difficult for them to be able to approach the administration and be able to actually convince them that they're actually facing this discrimination, which is recognized as a valid form of anti-religious discrimination. Right. Recently, Oxford University, where Rashmi studies, they commissioned a study through the 1928 Institute, which found that 80% of British Indians experienced discrimination on the basis of their Indian origin. And most importantly, the most prevalent form of that discrimination was itself Hindu phobia. So, all of our experiences as lived Hindus in the West, our experience is that Hindu phobia is a very real thing.
Give me
and
an
yet
example, because people are still willing to accept that there's discrimination on the basis of your Indian identity, but where do you draw the line that this is not based on your Indian heritage, but specifically about you being a Hindu student? Give me an example.
Yeah, so I'll give you two examples. So one is in 2016, I visited a cow sanctuary, a Gaushala here in the US. And the reason why I visited that cow sanctuary was just a few days earlier, a group of people in eastern Pennsylvania had taken it upon themselves to put a severed cow's head on the doorstep of this ISKCON Krishna devotee who was running this Gaushala. And they did that specifically to intimidate that person into moving away from that place because they knew that the cow had a special place for him within his religious tradition. So this is a clear example of out and out Hindu phobia that's perpetuated by the right wing in the US sometimes. On the other hand, you have people who call, from the left, who call Hindus all sorts of names. So just to give one example, on Facebook in 2020, I was called a Nazi for recognizing Hindu persecution in Kashmir and in Delhi, in the Delhi riots. As a result of that, my parents' car was put on social media with the license plate so that people could identify it. I was called a cow piss drinker, and a professor from Cambridge University actually liked that comment and led in many ways this charge against me. So you can see, just for speaking up for Hindu people and for documenting the religious persecution that has happened historically, Hindu people get labeled. This has nothing to do with BJP or RSS or anything. And just one last thing, Padmaja, is that, when American citizens are labeled in this way, that they are somehow beholden to a foreign power, our country has a very dangerous history with that, with Japanese Americans, Catholic Americans, and so many other groups.
Rashmi, what about you? You, of course, have been in the news a lot, but why would you say that this was done specifically because of Hindu phobia?
Well, I think adding on to what Arnav and Parth have said, I experienced pretty much the same thing in a different way. For the duration that I was president, there were posts made by faculty members at the university speaking very elaborately about how they enjoy breaking idols, Saraswati Murtis, so on and so forth, and then criticize the fact that my parents, they're devotees of Sri Ram, pulling pictures, all sorts of pictures from their profiles and making nasty comments about their religion. And it was only about their religious identity and nothing to do with their nationality or political preferences. But when there was a lot of criticism coming their way, saying that this is not all right, this is discrimination, it's also racism in many ways. So when all of that happened, the faculty member just took refuge under the word Hindutva, saying, "Oh, I'm just criticizing the Indian government." How are you criticizing the Indian government by making elaborate posts about enjoying breaking Saraswati Murtis, by doxing a student who's also the union president?
Why would a professor talk about breaking Murtis? What was the context of that conversation or that comment?
I don't know, to be very honest. I think the only context I can think of is Hinduphobia, because I haven't interacted with this particular faculty. I'm a
Was there
STEM
any action
student.
taken?
Yes, there have been a lot of investigations. There has been an investigation into the issue, and I'm very satisfied with whatever result that's been the outcome of it.
Prasada, what are your specific problems with this conference? Because in academia, there's always space for a conversation, everything can be discussed. But why are people calling out a conference where one side is presenting their views as Hindu-phobic and potentially as something that could lead to a backlash?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I think it's really important to look at what kind of resources is this conference sharing. So when we look at it, like Parth said already, they repeatedly say that Hinduphobia isn't real. Hinduphobia is just used as a tool to silence criticism of the Indian government. And again, I don't think any Hindu student across the US, UK, or Canada is offended if someone says something about Modi or any Indian political party. But when people are offended is when deliberately Hindu sacred symbols are desecrated to resemble the Nazis, to draw a parallel between Hindus and Nazis. And we've seen this happen a lot recently, where an Om symbol was literally desecrated to look like the Nazi flag. That's one example. And the second one is they completely deny Hindu persecution, and they do this very strategically. So they're trying to say that Hindu persecution has never happened, Hinduphobia isn't real, and this is a very deliberate tactic to basically create a proximity between Hindus and white people to make Hindus look like the white people of South Asia, because white people have never faced like systematic discrimination the way that people of color have. And this is what they're essentially trying to do with this entire thing, and then make it look like Hindus are completely privileged. Hindus could have never been through anything throughout history. Hindus are the colonial force, not the one that have been oppressed. And they strategically do this to make it justifiable to be Hinduphobic.
Okay, Rashmi, before I come